I want to thank JVS for inviting me, and it's been a pleasure getting to know so many of you and this very cool organization. So I thought I would start by telling you what passed for Jewish Vocational Services when I was a teenager in Trenton, New Jersey. I needed a summer job, so I went to the Jewish Community Center, said, you know, what can I do? And they said, congratulations, you're a volunteer at our summer camp, you start tomorrow. Great. I was sure, I drove in the next morning so excited because I was sure I was going to be the lifeguard because nobody rocked a Chubette tank suit from Corvettes quite the way I did. Imagine my surprise when I was told I was going to be an assistant to the pre-K campers. All right. They were cute and they were funny and I loved them, but the assistant's job at a summer camp for pre-K is pretty much zipping up, cleaning up, mopping up, and wiping up, and that's a whole world of wiping up with the pre-K. And then I had to get the kids in and out of their, get their snacks and get their lunches and get them in and out of their bathing suits and in and out of the pool and on and off the potty. And again, very often the potty and the pool were the one and the same. And so by the time quiet time came, I was ready for a nap. But my campers, not so much. Because you see, quiet time was 30 minutes in the only air-conditioned room in the building. But that first shot of AC, boy, those kids were raring to go. And it was like, so I invented a game. And my game was called Let's Have a Funeral. So I would assign each kid a role. Every day they got new roles. There would be the rabbi and the cantor and the grieving spouse and the weeping cousin and the annoying cousin and security. And then I would push 4 folding chairs together and I would lay down, put my hands like this, and I had a nice nap. So the rabbi would lead the service and the cantor would sing whatever he or she wanted. She got to choose the song of the day. It was very often the name game. And they would stand over me and whisper nice things. And by the time they got antsy, I had a nice 20-minute snooze. And I was up and I was ready for graham crackers and high C, just the way they were. Which is my long-winded way of saying I'm glad there's a real JVS that's operating now. I had polio as an infant, and while it didn't stop me from much, there were times and activities where I was less of the bride and more of the bridesmaid, which was not a role I really cared for. Like, for instance, at school, when all the girls and that one fabulous boy were playing jump rope. Even double dutch, my job was designated twirler, and my partner was the doorknob. Okay. But it was either that or sit on the sidelines, and, you know, when you're not in the thick of the action, obviously, that's where you are. You're on the side. And even on those days, what, you need this? Okay, even in those days, when you're on the side, you've got choices. You've got the choice of looking down, because you're not there, so you're not playing the game. Why should you bother? Or you can look out and sort of look forward and see what's going on. I mean, I guess there is a third option. You could look up, but then your neck would be stiff and you might fall in a hole, and so I don't advise looking up. So now don't get the impression that I was wise beyond my years when I came up with this solution. The fact that I didn't like looking down probably had something to do with the fact that I was looking at orthopedic shoes, and that's not a pretty sight. Plus, I didn't like looking down because I was missing things. You know, when you look out, when you're looking forward, you see something weird or something funny or something you shouldn't see or something interesting. And boy, I'm having problems today. That's all right. You can just there. All right? Okay, we're good? All right, I'll talk really loud. You know, you'd see everything, or sometimes you'd even see somebody carrying a pink bakery box who wouldn't mind sharing a sprinkle cookie with a sister. So I was a big fan of looking out. And when you look forward, whether it's in anticipation or just out of curiosity, when you watch what's going on, in front of you, you'll be surprised at how included you are. Even when you're not in the game. I mean, listen, people watch sports and they're not playing it, but you're included. You feel like you're part of it. And you'll be surprised how many mentors you find by just looking out, and how many, you want me louder? And how many mentors you find by looking out, how many life lessons you learn, how much richer your life is. Not to mention how much gossip you overhear. I always think that that's how I'm going to die in a restaurant, is I'm going to be listening to the people behind me, and I'm going to go right back on my chair. Now, I have no clue about the real secrets of the universe, but the little stuff, man, I am all over them. Coming in from the parking lot today, I'm reminded at how nice it feels when somebody holds the door open for you. And it's so easy. It took them 1 second to be considerate, but it made me feel great at the moment. You feel taken care of. So you're feeling good, I'm feeling good. Maybe it's for a second, maybe it's for the rest of the day. But it's a tiny little thing. I've learned how powerful it is when you smile at somebody, and to be smiled at. I got the pity smiles, but I'll take it. I don't care why you're smiling. And I smile now at, strangers and ladies on power walks and the elderly. I smile at everyone except, like if I think you're a would-be murderer. And I got to tell you, in that case, I'll just smile with my eyes because, maybe you're not. But none of that happens if you're looking down or living inside your head. Now, I had a lot of surgeries as a kid, and these days you have a major surgery. 3 days later, you're on Dancing with the Stars. But when I was a kid, you were in a big, heavy cast, and you stayed home from school, and you were on a makeshift bed on the ground floor of your house for a couple of months. And so in the mornings, while my mother was getting my father ready for school, for work, and my sister ready for school, I could watch television. And this, in my house, my mother, watching TV in the daytime was the end of civilization. I mean, it had to be dark. Talk about Shabbos. It had to be dark for her to turn on the TV. So I would watch TV. And morning TV back then was pretty much the Today Show. Now, Barbara Walters was my first, She wasn't what my Nana would call a glamour-puss. Because if you remember, many of you don't, but a lot of you do remember, in those days, women wore evening gowns on game shows. Mrs. Cleaver put on pearls to do yard work. So Barbara was just regular, and she was sitting there, and she was talking to me, and she was sitting behind a desk with all these men. Now, I have no idea what she was talking about. I had no interest in what she was talking about. All I saw, the visual, the optic, was a woman doing what no other women were doing it, when and where no other women were doing it. Okay, now in elementary school, teachers and librarians tried to introduce me to my perfect role model, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the polio president. But you've got to believe me, I was so disconnected from my disability that I never understood why everybody else was getting books on inventors and on athletes. And I was getting an old man in a lap robe with a cigarette in his mouth. Once in a while, if my mother wrote a note, they'd switch it up and I'd get the biography of Helen Keller. And everyone meant well. I appreciate that. But my role model didn't have to have braces like mine. That's not how I saw myself. That's not how I defined myself. What touched me, and in fact, what still touches me, are people who speak to a part of my heart that I'm not brave enough to either acknowledge or embrace. Barbara Walters was a woman who got a seat at the table and made herself comfortable. That I got. Now, the good thing about living in Trenton, New Jersey, and believe me, that is not the beginning of a sentence you're going to hear a lot, but the good thing about living in Trenton, New Jersey was how easy it was to leave Trenton and get on a train and go to New York. It was only 60 minutes, and when I was in 3rd grade, my parents took me to my first Broadway show, Flower Drum Song. As if the polio didn't date me. Now you know exactly how old I am. I've never felt so happy so engaged, so completely enthralled in my life. I mean, I definitely remember thinking, I had no idea I could feel this good. Now, mind you, a career in the entertainment industry wasn't even a blip on my radar. When adults would say, what do you want to do when you grew up? I said foreign correspondent. I didn't know what it was, but it shut them up. But had they asked me how I wanted to feel when I grew up, that I could have told them. Like a nice Jewish girl, I applied only to colleges in the Northeast. I don't know why. That's just what we did. It was like every autumn, someone shook my temple, and all the Jews rolled to Syracuse or BU. But having been in both Syracuse and Boston during the winter, I knew that was never going to happen. So my mother approved that I could go in the South as long as it was in our time zone. And my Nana said I could go anywhere in the South I wanted except Miami because, you know. I swear she was one of those post-World War II self-loathing Jews who went to temple every Friday night. I swear to you, it was only to pray that Barbra Streisand would get a nose job. So now there are a lot of impressive schools in temperate climates, but only one didn't have a math requirement, which is how I ended up at Rollins College in Winter Park, Florida. And I got there. I had never set foot, again, in Florida, because as I said, there were Florida Jews and there were Bahamas Jews, which may be why there were so many limbo poles at bat mitzvahs, but we were Bahamas Jews. Anyway, so the first day I set foot in Florida was my first day of college. And I have never felt so out of place in my life. You know, I grew up with the same group of people. They knew me. And I know a lot of freshmen feel this way, and that was some comfort, but I wasn't used to feeling so other, you know, so stared at. I wasn't used to feeling handicapped. And I didn't know how I could convince people that the way I walked wasn't who I was, and I didn't know how I could convince myself that, because, you know, I was starting to doubt that myself. So I did something I really didn't do a lot before, and that is I kept my head down. So one day I'm sitting alone in my dorm room listening to The King and I. Yes, this was right after Woodstock. I can't imagine why I didn't have friends. It must have been the legs. I'm listening to King and I in my dorm room. And there was Deborah Carr, and she was saying that whenever she felt afraid, she held her head erect and whistled a happy tune, and no one would know she was afraid. I thought, all right, this is like looking out. This is like looking forward. This is like getting out of your head and faking it till you make it. All right, I could do that. So I tried, and I joined some clubs, and I joined a sorority, and I tried the school newspaper. And then one day, to get out of the heat, I swear I was always looking for air conditioning my whole life, I walked into the theater department, and they handed me a paintbrush, and I'm painting a flat, and I've never felt so enthralled and engaged and excited and exhilarated. And I was 8 years old, and I was in the audience at Flower Drum Song at the St. James Theater again. And I thought, okay, I got it. This is how I feel. And that was it. I was me again. And after school, I went to work I worked at the Coconut Grove Playhouse in Miami. Sorry, Nana. I worked and you haven't lived till you've, you know, brought Shelley Winters her takeout while she was on the toilet and naked. And I worked in summer stock in Western Massachusetts at a tent theater owned by Ann Corio, who was the very old queen of burlesque. And at the end, she was always topless for her finale, and I swear to God, you used to be able to hear her go, and she would suck everything in to show her, and then she'd go right back down again. Anyway, those made me feel, I was doing grunt work. I mean, I was selling refreshments. I was picking up programs off the floor. I was at Flower Drum Song again. I was me again. It was great. After that, I went to New York, and I got a job at the National Lampoon first on Lemmings, which introduced the world to John Belushi and Chris Guest and Chevy Chase, which I apologize for, but they were all there. And again, I was selling groups. I made $56 in 3 months. I'm sure my parents were very proud. But I loved it. And when the show ended, I wrote a memo to the chairman of the board of Lampoon, and I took him to task for not utilizing me and my incredible skill set. Mind you, I'm 22 years old. Here's my entire skill set. I could dry my hair without looking in the mirror. That was it. But he hired me. And I was doing the lowest level of magazine grunt work, and I loved it. It wasn't a theater, but I felt like that again. And I made wonderful friends, and I worked incredibly hard. And there I was, having so much fun at the Lampoon. And we did the Lampoon show and the radio hour with Gilda Radner and Billy and Brian Doyle Murray and all those people. And it was extraordinary. I was learning about some radio. Who worked in radio at that time? I loved it. It was wonderful. When I was at the Lampoon, a true comedy genius, Doug Kenny, who wrote Caddyshack and Animal House and did lots of stuff, was doing a parody of a 1964 high school yearbook. You can still get it on Amazon, and it is hilarious. And I rehearsed my skill set, again, the drying the hair, and offered my services. And he said, well, you know, there always is a handicapped kid in the school. Can we use your crutches? And I said, I sort of come with them. And he said, all right, you be the handicapped girl. And you can also be my assistant. And I thought, okay, I want to be in the yearbook. I mean, I'll get my picture taken. I'll be history. And I've worked with the best comedic minds, but I had to now define myself by the way I walked. I did it. It creeped me out. I loved every minute I wasn't being. My character's name was Ursula Waterski. Under my picture, it said, "Until I met a man with no feet." I mean, it's a wonderful thing. But at first, I pretended that I loved it. And you know, got a lot of accolades, and I pretended how happy I was. Years later, it took me years before I finally went, this is really funny, until I got into it. But I was faking it all that time. And I got there, and I realized I could laugh at myself. It was cool to laugh at myself. It was genuinely funny. And it also made other people relieved and happy that they could laugh along with me. After the Lampoon, I went into public relations, and again, I felt that feeling. I loved it. I mean, I was working on cool clients. I mean, if I had, like the Ebola account, I don't think I would have been as happy. But I was having fun. That's what it was. A friend of mine from college in the theater department, the air-conditioned theater department, was working in New York as a stand-in on a TV show. He was Tony Randall's stand-in on Love, Sydney, and he invited me to the Christmas party. And rather than buy a dress, I wrote a sample script. And I went to the party, and with balls I never knew I had, I handed out my script, stopped at the dessert table, and ran out into the street. And 3 months later, they said if I wanted to be a TV writer, I could for 6 weeks. And that was my first job. And oh my God, that feeling was back. I was doing what I loved. I didn't know anything. Talk about faking it. I didn't know what the words meant. I didn't know anything. But I did it. I mean, I showed up my first day as a TV writer in a fur coat. I didn't know. The next day I was in a T-shirt, but whatever. Eventually I got work. I moved to California, and I wrote my first pilot with Norman Lear, and I worked on hit shows, and I worked on flops, and I realized that sometimes you laugh harder on the flops than you do on the hits, and the quality of the show was never as important for me as the quality of people I was working with, which may be why I'm not rich, but at least I had a lot of laughs. I had a great time. And there were magical shows. I mean, Murphy Brown and Frasier and Will and Grace and Wife and Kids, lots of great shows. Less magical, I will tell you one horrible story, because why not? I'm here. I worked on, you're lucky if you get 1 minute to Q&A. But anyway, it was a show called It's Gary Shandling Show. And it was the first, I think, half hour on Showtime, the first comedy. And I still love this show, and I admire this show, and I loved writing for this show, and I loved the actors. But some of the men on the staff, and I was the only woman, were perhaps not as evolved as you would like. So I used to, I'd be sitting in Gary's office, I'd be sitting on the chair talking to Gary at his desk, and I'd feel a tap on my shoulder. And I'd turn, and it was a flaccid penis. Now, first of all, ooh, exactly right. I mean, if you're going to flash, have the dignity, put your best foot forward. Because that wasn't anything anybody should have to see. Now, the guys laughed and laughed. Oh, God, they never tired of it. And somebody taps your shoulder, it's your instinct. And it was always that. And they would laugh and laugh, and I never let them see me break. But I may have cried all the way home and eaten, but they never saw me break. And finally, you have to leave it. I couldn't do it. I looked down, I got out, and it was the best thing I ever did, was to leave that show. As I've gotten older, it's become painfully clear to me that I'm not in demand as much as I once was. There are 22-year-old writers the way I was a 22-year-old writer. And that hit me like a ton of bricks. I got to tell you, I kept my head down. I was ashamed. I didn't like how I felt. And then I remembered about faking it and looking past my head and onto the horizon. And I remembered that there were plays I wanted to write. I'd written jokes for the play Hairspray, the musical Hairspray, and for the Broadway show, and I'd written jokes for other shows. People had come to me. I talked my way into one musical job. I wrote a play, I wrote another musical. There's a book I want to write that I've started that fills my heart. Because I was looking out, I ran into a friend who was starting a website. She said, "You want to write for it?" I said, "Yes." She said, "It's about cars." I went, okay. My column will be called "No, You Shut Up and Drive," because that's pretty much what I'm always saying to people. So I've been having so much fun, I hardly have any time to devote to my other job, which is online solitaire. Now, do I still get depressed? Of course I do. Do I go inside my head and play victim? And I've been known to. Do I look down and see my little leg and my big brace? Yeah, that happens. And plus, I fall down a lot, and I fall down ugly. I fall really ugly. But every time I do, I feel alone. I feel so handicapped, and then I get up, which I also do ugly. If you've ever seen, those National Geographic where they show you a giraffe being born and trying to stand, that's me getting up. It's not good. But I do it. And I remind myself to fake smile until I feel the real thing. And I look forward, and I go forward in anticipation. And, sometimes I even remember to whistle a happy tune. Thank you.